It's been a bit of a bloodbath over in the US, and that's almost entirely stemmed from the fact that Donald Trump has again indicated that he wants to shake up the Fed and potentially even remove the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. And I think that is terrifying markets because a politicised Fed would be one in which we see much higher inflation and accordingly much higher interest rates eventually, which would ultimately lead stock markets into a massive crash.
And so with the gains that we saw on the stock market following Trump's announcement of this 90-day pause, are we seeing that largely wiped out because of this back and forth here?
Yeah, it's certainly taken a big hit. At the moment, you almost need a degree in psychology to forecast where the economy and stock market are going. And that's because almost everything that's happening is happening due to the actions of one man, Donald Trump. And so the real question is of whether the stock market's going to continue falling or maybe even stage recovery is really a question of, is Donald Trump going to stop hitting the economy in the face with his own policy decisions? And that's a decision that really only one man can answer, and the rest of us are going to have to just wait and find out.
So tell us about this pressure that Donald Trump is piling on the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell.
Well, the Federal Reserve has cut interest rates since the rise in inflation, much like the Reserve Bank of Australia. But Donald Trump clearly wants them to be cutting interest rates by more and by faster amounts. That being said, inflation in the US is still above their target of around 2%, and the unemployment rate is still low. So if you look at just the economic facts, it's difficult to justify further interest rate cuts, especially when you see the high inflation that might be caused by Trump's tariffs. So the Federal Reserve is playing it cautiously, as I think is appropriate. But Donald Trump, isn't a fan of caution. He wants low interest rates right now, and he's not above intervening in the Federal Reserve if he thinks that'll get his goal quicker.
Now, there's a risk that Trump might fire Jerome Powell. Can he do that?
Look, that's a big open-ended question. The Federal Reserve's lawyers have looked over the statute books, and they're of the opinion that he can't. And Jerome Powell's being very clear that, according to the Federal Reserve, he believes that he's got a fixed term and can't be fired before then. That being said, all legal questions in the United States are ultimately resolved by the Supreme Court of the United States. And whether if Trump were to take his case to the Supreme Court, I think there is a decent chance that they would rule in his favour. No guarantee by any stretch, but it's certainly a possibility. And so financial markets are sort of aware of this possibility and aware of certainly the damage that such a fight would cause. And that's why they're thinking, even if the law isn't specifically clear, there's clearly a risk that if Donald Trump wanted to, he could fire Jerome Powell. And even if he didn't want to fire Jerome Powell, at the end of the day, Jerome Powell's appointment will expire at some point in the term, and so he will be able to appoint his successor, even if he doesn't go about the messy business of firing him. So there are lots of risks abound when it comes to Donald Trump's management of the economy, and this is certainly one that's weighing on financial markets' minds at the moment.
And while that threat is there, of course, so we're going to expect to see that volatility on the markets.
That's right. Anytime Donald Trump indicates that he's willing to intervene in a way that's going to cause economic harm and disruption, that's going to be reflected in the financial markets.